Go. Should be a little note for everybody appearing. Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for everybody for joining today. I've noticed I'm really dark today. It's really sunny outside, but something seems to have gone wrong with my lighting. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today, and for those watching as a recording. I'm by far the least important person in the room. I know I'm the most important person in my life, but I'm the least important person in the room today because it's fantastic. We've got a lot of people tuning in to listen to our guest today. And what a guest we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have the amazing Mr. Matthew Hollynott. And Matthew and I have been friends for a couple of years now, nearly 3 years, I think. And he's a huge friend and supporter of Thrive, and we do a lot of stuff in collaboration as well as go on regular radio shows as well. So if anyone's interested in mine and Matthew's ramblings of on a Tuesday evening, I'm sure we can put the link in the show notes after this as well. So um, I'm not gonna spoil Matthew's thunder, but needless to say, it's a very personal journey and recollection that Matthew's going to share to us today, and I think hopefully you'll find it very insightful and a way to maybe utilize some of Matthew's hints and tips in your own life. So, Matthew, I'm going off screen now, but I'm here in spirit, and I'll be sort of liaising in the chat for you. But my friend, it's over to you.
Brilliant. So thanks ever so much for that. I really appreciate the welcome. Probably little bit too much, but yeah, I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Hello everyone. I hope you're well. Yeah, I've got sort of half an hour with everyone at the moment. So I am going to start just by telling you what we're going to do over the next half hour. Just tell you a little bit of background about myself. And then get on with the presentation. Simon sent me over some fantastic graphics, which I need to use hopefully at the start of the presentation. So here's going, hoping that it's actually going to work. As I said at the very beginning, I am a little bit tech unfriendly, so if there are any glitches that come through in the presentation, my apologies for that. It's nothing to do with the tools that I've been given. It's just the operator that is causing the problems. So I'm going to give you a short webinar this morning called Chasing Sunrises, and I'll get to the reason why we're calling it Chasing Sunrises at the end. But when Simon asked me to do a presentation a couple of months ago, he said, "What are you going to talk about?" And I genuinely had no idea. And on the back of that and a couple of conversations with Simon, it really seemed that routine and habit probably was going to be the best place to start with for myself. And again, I'll explain a little bit why about the habits as we go through the presentation. A couple of little housekeeping notes just to start with. It's 30 minutes, which is it's a pretty personal presentation, to be honest, and it just comes from my experience, and I don't really want you to think that this is just 30 minutes of self-indulgence. I hope you don't go away with thinking that. But I think we all need to remember that we come from very different experiences. We've got very different backgrounds, and as a result of that background and that experience that we have, we're all going to have different thoughts and different feelings as we go through the presentation. So if there is anyone that struggles with what I'm saying, if there's anyone that feels uncomfortable about what I'm saying, please, don't hesitate to let us know. Please don't hesitate if you feel the need to leave the presentation. Again, please feel free to do so. The most important thing with all of this is your well-being and your comfort. Having said that, I don't think I'm going to be talking about too much which is too contentious, but there may be some things within the presentation that make you think a little bit about your own self and about how you feel. So you can opt out of the discussion at any time. You can leave at any time, and the session is really designed to improve well-being, hopefully pick up some notes of perhaps the sort of journey that I have been going through, but not detract from your well-being. I'm going to ask you in a few minutes as well, just to have a little bit of thought about routines and about habits and even about rituals as well. It's been, even just writing this webinar has been a massive learning curve for me, and quite a lot of reflection has gone into really the bits and pieces that you'll see coming up over the next few minutes as well. And it's something that well, as you'll see in the presentation, I try and do each day is to reflect a little bit on personal learning, on personal growth, and my own well-being, really, so that, and I'm going to use one of Simon's phrases, so that I can put my own oxygen mask on before I try and put on anyone else's oxygen mask. So, who am I and why am I here? Well, let's start with who am I. My name's Matthew Hoddenott. I'm a 53-year-old engineer. I've spent the last 30 odd years playing in the construction industry. And for anyone that's familiar with the construction industry, it's a fantastically exciting place to work. It's also incredibly aggressive. It's incredibly, or it certainly was when I started, male orientated. There's an awful lot of macho-ness within the industry, although it's getting better and better every day that we live through it. But it is also an incredibly exciting place to work, and it's certainly one of the places where often I'll go out and about with my family, and you'll see places where no matter how small you've had an impact on, you can see places where you have had an impact. So it's a really gratifying industry to work in. This slide isn't quite how I wanted it to look, to be honest. When I read through it just shortly before the presentation, there's a lot more no's than yeses in this presentation. And I'm very much better at saying yes than I am no, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical practitioner. So there will not be anything within this presentation that you get which will really cover you in terms of psychology or of a medical nature. You also won't get your answers from this presentation. This is a really personal presentation, and it's my story. But what you will do is get some ideas from it, hopefully. I'm really at pains to make clear that I've got no excuses for this and for what you're going to see in a few minutes. Really, it is what it is. It's something that's happened. It's not really good or bad judgment, or they're from my point of view, I reflect on it as just being part of me, rather than, you know, this is an awful part. And I think what I'm probably trying to say is it's not a place for sympathy or congratulations. It just is what it is, and I hope that as we go through it, there'll be bits of it that you can take if you feel you need to, that may help in certain areas. One of the other things it's not is it's not how to do something. So it's not a guide of this will lead you down this path to these goals. It's just how I did it. It suits me, and you may or may not agree with anything or everything that I've got to say, and that's perfect. That's how it should be. Because we're all on our own journey. We all have our own path to walk. And if anything, the one thing that I've probably learned over the last few years, is you have to have the courage of your own convictions to know really the right side of the path to tread on for yourselves, rather than treading someone else's path. So what are we going to do? We're going to ponder on habits and routines. We're going to look at habits versus routines versus rituals. We're going to have a look at some of the psychology behind it, although not in great depth, just really as an amateur interest looking into it. And then we're probably going to get onto my favourite subject, which is chatting about me. Throughout the presentation, it's really about celebrating each and every one of us as the unique individuals we are. And if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them whatsoever. So the first thing I'd really like us to do, just for 10, 15, 20 seconds or so, is just to actually list down a habit. If you want to pop it into the chat where Simon's looking at it, that would be really useful. And just actually list out what you perceive is a habit. I should have some background music or something that goes along with this, some lift music. So I have another few minutes. If you want to pop that into the chat, or if you'd rather keep it to yourself, and then in a separate column, I'd really like you to have a look at listing down what you would perceive as a routine. Think about the differences that you think of a routine and a habit as being. Let's see if there's any in the chat. Here we go. Here we go from Bex. We've got a habit of yours is overthinking. We've got Simon. Sorry, we've had. They're still coming in. Here we go. Right. So, Julia. Hi, Julia. We've got make coffee first thing in the morning. That to me definitely is a habit. Simon, I always have to have my towel straight when I'm exercising in the morning. I think again that's a habit. Bex, a habit of mine is overthinking too much, and honestly, Bex, I think you are not going to be alone. I've certainly been in that spiral that you get when that thought arrives in your head, and then it goes down and down and down, and everything then comes into play, and that what if question continually comes in. I've had that very much today, and we'll see how the next 20 minutes or so pan out. I try and exercise every morning, and this is where it becomes really interesting. This I try is where it really becomes a habit versus a routine. So Simon's also then put in there, I make sure I have my keys where I can find them, and that again is a habit, unlike myself who makes sure that I have my keys where I can't find them continually. Tracy has a habit of walking every morning and a routine of brushing teeth. I think both of them are probably routines, Tracy. And we'll have a look at some of the definitions. Sue, a routine of walking dogs, and that's what gets her out of bed. And we'll look at that a little bit later on as well. That purpose in the morning of how we control that. And Bex is saying, yes, dog walking routine. Massively relate to overthinking. Amanda, overthinking, self-doubt, very habitual behaviours, and the routine of dog walking. And then Simon at the very end has put, I probably have to find my keys and wallet about 15 times a day. A really good example of perhaps where his habit of putting his keys in a place where he can find that is not really working so much and not performing the cues that he really wants. So I think that's thanks, Simon. I think that's an excellent place to start with. So habits literally govern our lives. Everything that we do really revolves around some sort of constant repetition of action and behavior that gets us to the point where we actually want to do. So a habit is described as an action which is done on a regular basis with little or no thought behind that action. And then a routine has been described as a course of action to be followed regularly, a standard procedure. But I think the element of these 2 points is the amount of thought that actually goes into the action of either the habit or the routine. So both habits and routines are regular repeated actions, but habit have with little or no conscious thought, whereas a routine requires a high degree of intention and effort. For a behavior or an action, like Simon putting his keys in a place where he remembers them, it needs to be repeated regularly. And I think Simon in the past, who has this infinite store of statistics, has said, you need to repeat something 69 times or 72 times before it becomes a habit, if it ever becomes a habit at all. There's actually so much more to the habit and to the routine than just that repetition. There also has to be some desire that goes into there. There has to be a behavior and a purpose that goes into making that routine or that habit something that actually becomes forming, and something that becomes a form of that repetitive nature. There's a fascinating book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he's got this habit loop within inside it, and basically everything starts from a cue. And that cue is your prompt. That's the bit at the side of the stage that says, this is what I want, this is how I want to behave, this is the feeling that I need to achieve. So effectively there will be a cue that says, I need my morning coffee now. That's how I'm going to wake up. I want to feel awake and alive. And then the routine kicks in, where you go downstairs, you boil your kettle, you put your coffee in, you put your milk in, and the reward is, that comes at the back end of that, the reward is feeling alive and starting to feel awake. The things that make habits and routines very, very different are the amount of purpose and the amount of effort that goes into the habit. So, for example, the ability to crave sugar and continually eat sweets. If you have an open packet of sweets next to you, the cue is, you could be driving, you could be sat at the table watching television, you could be sat in your lounge watching television, and the habit is the instant need for the satisfaction of the sweet. But there's very little effort, there's very little consciousness that goes into that action of dipping your hand down into the bag to pull a sweet out, to put it into your mouth whilst you're still engrossed in the television. Whereas, for example, we saw earlier from Sue, she mentioned the idea of routines, and her routine in the morning, and many of your routines in the morning, was this getting up to go and walk your dogs. And there's a lot more effort and consciousness that actually goes into that. You physically have to think, I'm going to put whatever clothes on, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get the dogs ready, I'm then going to go out and walk the dogs. And whilst I'm walking the dog, this is the reaction that I'm going to get. I'm going to get this connection with nature, I'm going to get the dogs exercised, I'm going to get various sets of jobs undertaken at the same thing. And all this is really well explained within The Power of Habit, and also by Bug in his research in 2007, the effort versus consciousness graph, which you can see in front of it. The final bit that I hadn't really thought about prior to writing this presentation was the bit about rituals. And we all have these. We all have these rituals that require that higher level of consciousness, that require that higher level of effort to actually go and get the reward at the end of it. So, for example, many of our rituals are religious based, or seasonal based, or festive based, around festivities and festivals. For example, Christmas coming up, we have the ritual within our house on Christmas Eve of always standing on the back patio and looking up to the sky to see Santa Claus's sleigh go over in the form of the NASA space shuttle, and or the NASA satellite. And that's been a ritual that we've incorporated into Christmas ever since my children, or my child, has been young and born, and it's something that we repeat. But there's a higher level of consciousness of what you're actually doing than just dipping your hand into the sweet jar, for example. And so when it comes to actually looking at routines of how we perform them, and what we're actually going to do with them, and if necessary, how do we actually change them, we have to really look quite deeply at the middle bit of that cue, routine, reward cycle in terms of habits. So, for example, many people's routine would be the cue as, I fancy a drink because it settles me down, it calms me down after a hard day's work. The cue would be that feeling, the routine would be to get up and pour yourself a drink, and the reward would be the calmness as you have that first drink. And indeed, I posted about this a couple of days ago. Adrian Charles was on the television, and he discussed this feeling in terms of drink, about the effect of the drink, that reward point within the drink only ever happens in that first drink that you have, and every other drink after that period always has less of an effect than that first one. And I think that's really a telling thing when it comes to looking at the routine and chasing that feel, that release of the endorphins that we have as we go through the routine. There's quite a lot of research that looks at, if we do have a bad habit, then rather than change the whole course, the cue and the reward, it's the routine that we have to look to change. And that's the bit that will calm us down and change and take away that bad habit. So for example, if we are looking to relax, one of the cues might be, I need to relax. And the routine might be, let's have a conversation with a loved one, with a friend, with a family member, in a calm and intuitive environment that enables us to have that relaxing feeling that we're craving, that we would otherwise have sought from the drink. There's a high link between the ability of what we're trying to do and the motivation of what we're trying to do. And this is what I touched on at the beginning of the presentation, was the feeling of purpose. If we're really, really motivated to do something, then we can actually achieve it. But the level of motivation really has an impact upon the success or meeting the action line, as Fogg has called it, in how we have the ability to actually achieve it. So why am I even talking about this? Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of history really about me. This is my world that you can see on the screen. This is a pretty common place for me to stand, albeit that this photograph is 10 years or so old. And this is actually up in Newcastle, 7 or 8 stories above the Tyne River. And we're putting in, or we're installing on a really busy construction site, we're installing what's going to be a living roof. So it's going to be an area where people can work, rest and play and exercise, all miles and miles, meters and meters above the skyline of Newcastle, above a superstore in Newcastle. And I've been doing this, like I said at the beginning, working in this sort of environment for 30 years. For those of you that know me, I believe I'm quite a calm and passive person. And this particular environment is quite a difficult, harsh environment that needs us to be relatively assertive. So you can imagine that one of the things that is the easiest thing for us to do at the end of the day is to work on these sorts of environments and then come back and go to the pub or sit down and have a drink. So these are a couple of the images of the sort of work we get involved with, the sort of things that we install, all above the cityscape. Try saying that without your teeth in. And all above the eyesight of anyone wandering around the trees, or wandering around the streets, sorry. It's really aimed at creating a sustainable environment for the future generations, for dealing with things like water, for dealing with the energy crisis. As you can see on this particular roof, all the solar panels which are there, and creating an area for biodiversity and connection. This is actually a yoga roof in the centre of Greenwich in London, on top of an IKEA store, which is open to the community to have community participation, such as yoga and other outdoor exercises. What I've found over the last 30 years is I'm really, really good at habits. It's probably what I've found over the last 50 years, is that I'm really, really good at habits. And one of the things that's probably niggling at the back of my head, and one of the reasons why I've never really dabbled with hardcore drugs or anything like that, for example, is I know that I have what I've always called a really addictive mind. I know that if an action is repeated often enough, it will become very, very difficult for me to break that. And I've dabbled with things like smoking. Smoking, in actual fact, was more of a dabble. I became a professional smoker, I think, and then found it really, really difficult to break that habit. The reason why I've got a picture of a thumb there, and this is really opening myself up quite a bit, is, yeah, even at 53, I find the habit, even when I'm the most tired, of sucking my thumb still creeps around and still comes back there. The cue is the tiredness, the routine is sucking my thumb, and the reward is feeling the comfort of the evening. So I think I've known that habits are not such a good thing for me, for an awfully long period of time. One of the things that I got involved with at a very, very young age, was, I got a real taste for alcohol, and I've always lived around alcohol. I've for as long as I can remember, it's been part and parcel of my life. I used to travel a lot, with my parents as expats, and a lot of our life and our community used to be based around the clubs where we lived in different countries, and that used to be, a very much alcohol-based relationship. Not for me, but watching it at the stage. I had uncles and aunts, whose first drink of the day, and these were. Sorry, first drink of the day is probably a bit of a stretch, but certainly 11 o'clock onwards would be either gin or whiskey, and that was seen as something of a social norm within the environment that I grew up in. And then, whilst I was at school and I went away to school, I went to a boarding school. We had our own pub there, which I managed to wangle away of managing. And that obviously, again, led me to the opportunity of being around alcohol for quite a period of time. So my unconscious routine after 30 years or so used to be to get up early, to try and remember what happened last night, or what I watched on TV, for example, to stand in the bathroom and promise myself that tonight would be different. It never was. To clear up my mess from last night, and hopefully no one would notice the pretty much empty 3 litre box of wine. To go to work reminding myself that I was high functioning. I found that phrase and I really liked it. I almost adopted it for myself, and that sort of made up for every excuse that I could think of in the book for my behavior at the time. I'd work hard, and certainly I don't think my work ethic was ever questioned by anyone. I don't think, or at least I think I managed to progress, to fairly senior positions within the company, in the environment that I was working in, quite comfortably. And then I would come home, always the same, via the shops, and always had to pick up something from the shops, whatever that might be. It might be a card for someone's birthday in 6 months' time. And bizarrely, there would always be a bottle of wine or a pack of beer or something that would fall into my basket. I'd say hello to my family and then go and cook tea. And what tea actually meant was I could be in the kitchen, with 4 pints of Stella or similar and some wine, as I settled down for the evening. Put my little man to bed, usually falling asleep beside him, and then bed for myself a little bit later on, hopefully without upsetting my wife. So this all changed for me, really. This all changed with the arrival of an email. Now, when I changed jobs in 2007, I was, at the interview, the chap interviewing me, who's a really close personal friend now, asked me what one of my goals in life was. And I was thinking on my feet randomly. I was a tubby 35-year-old. Didn't look like I'd done a day's exercise in my life. And I said, I want to run the London Marathon. And he didn't question it at all. Bless him. He didn't question, didn't look at me and think, yeah, right, or anything. He just accepted that as something. And I suppose that became a bit of a goal for me. And then back in 2017, this arrived, through my email, from Asthma Research, and it said I'd been fortunate enough to get a place in the London Marathon. And this really was the changing point for me. This was what really, awoken me to perhaps the behaviours that I was exhibiting and the ways that I needed to change, the behaviours that I had, and possibly what I was missing out on in life as well, really. So This is the first London marathon I ran back in 2018. It was the hottest London marathon on record. I have absolutely no idea why in the middle image I'm wearing a pair of gloves. And there is a bit of a bizarre story, but someone that I started running with, who was in inverted commas teaching me how to run, said, "Oh, I always wear gloves. It's a must to wear gloves," when we first started running. Bearing in mind that was in November. And so I always wore gloves. I always went out and wore gloves. And a couple of years later, when I asked him, why on earth am I wearing gloves in the summer? He said, don't be daft. I only meant for the winter. But anyway, there you go. I'm wearing a pair of gloves in the middle of the London Marathon, in the hottest London Marathon on record. But it was one of the most exhilarating days of my life. And during that period, I would still have my evening routine. I'd still have my evening routine of 4 pints of Stella and then whatever other wine was in the house. And I started to realize that I wasn't running any further distance. So I thought I need to go to the gym. And I went to the gym and I did the induction in the gym. I'm not a gym bunny. I'm not someone that really enjoys going into there and showing my muscle development off or anything else, but I needed extra strength to run the 26 miles. And I bought I started to work with a coach, and he did a health check on me, and he said, look, I don't want to frighten you, but you need to go to a doctor fairly quickly, because if you don't, you're going to have serious problems with your blood pressure. And I strongly suggest you don't go through your evening's routine with your wine and your beer. And that was the last drink I had. That was on the 22nd of December 2017, and I've not touched one since. Initially, I thought, I'm only going to do this till the end of the marathon on the 23rd of April 2018, and then I can have a nice beer at the end of it. And I realised when I got to the end of the marathon and I stood outside the Institute of Directors on Pall Mall, I realised, actually, do you know what? I've done 5 months without a drink, and I've survived it. And it's the first time in nearly 30 years I've been able to do that. What on earth am I doing? Why do I need to go back to it? And so I didn't. I never have. I look at it pretty much every day and I think, yeah, it would be nice. But I think now the fear is in a position that I've done nearly 5 years without it. I'd rather not have another one just in case. It's almost like I've been given a gift of not having a drink, that I don't really want to take that gift away. So what made me change, and how do I develop it, and how do I make sure that that keeps me on the straight and narrow now? So there's a number of things that really made me change, and certainly during the marathon training, it becomes a routine. You have runs where you run 5 kilometers twice a week, 7 kilometers on a Friday, and then do a long run on a Sunday or something similar. And that becomes your routine. You build up to where you're running perhaps 35, 40 miles a week, and it becomes something that you have to do. It becomes something that is in you, that actually, I don't mind getting up in the morning. I don't mind doing this. I don't mind doing that. I really look forward to it, and I enjoy the feeling at the end of it. But that wasn't necessarily enough. That wasn't enough that once you'd hit the goal of running the marathon, that would keep you on the straight and narrow afterwards. That wasn't really the be all and end all of everything. So I started looking at other ways that I could improve it. And I came across this gentleman, Darren Hardy. Darren's, for anyone that hasn't read his books, this particular book, The Compound Effect, is an incredible read. It's absolutely fascinating. I suggest you read it rather than listen to it, because if you listen to it, Darren comes across, albeit very accomplished, but as someone that is very, very, and I'm trying to think of the nicest possible way, but very, very in your face. This is what you've got to do. This will change your life. This is how you have to do it. But the advice that he has within the presentation is incredible. Within the book is amazing. And he says that you'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routine. And one of the stories that he said within the daily routine was actually to look at doing something repetitively in very, very small chunks. And he gave a story of an example of a man who had been through issues with his marriage. And the advice he'd given the man was every morning, just get up and think about one thing that makes you realize why you love your partner. And so I thought that was really, really interesting. I didn't believe I had any issues with my marriage, but I've done that now for 5 years. I get up and I think every morning of one reason how my partner changes my life. And I actually write that down. And that's become part of my routine of every morning. And there's a reason behind that, is it because not only does it realize and help me with the gratitude that I have for the life that I have, but it also helps me put my head on straight. It also helps me focus on the day ahead. The next book that really changed the things that I did was this book by Gary Keller. It's just called The One Thing. And it's literally that. It just says focus on one thing that you can do that means you do not have to do, sorry, focus on one thing that you can do that makes everything else easier or unnecessary. And choose that one thing every single day. And then the final part of really what makes my routine now, or the final two parts of it, is having a purpose. And I didn't realize this at the time. I took this photograph this morning, actually. This is the back of my office. This is welcome to the cluttered world I live in. But it's a little sign that I did many years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago now, when I was working with a coach. And he said, imagine yourself when you're 60, write down where you want to be in your life. And I'd forgotten about it for many years, and then came across it fairly recently, certainly within the last year to 18 months, of this is where I'm going to be, where I'm 60. This is how I plan my life to look. And it's quite incredible, really, when you see.
If you hold on to a beautiful life.
There you go. I'm so sorry. That's my wife. It's quite incredible when you look at it and realize actually having those goals all those years ago still present quite a heavy influence on my life at the moment. And then genuinely, the final thing in what forms my routine today is something called the Four Agreements, written by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it's just an operation of how to focus on your life and how to look at hopefully be the best person that you can be within the day that you have ahead. So it's things like be impeccable with your word, speak with integrity, don't take anything personally because you're not in control of anything else that anyone else says. Don't make assumptions within the work and within the day and the conversations that you have. And my personal favorite one is always do your best, and your best may change depending on how you are. Don Miguel Ruiz then went on to write a fifth agreement, which is be skeptical, but learn to listen, question everything, but listen with an open heart and an open mind. And these 5 agreements really form a backbone of the routines that we look to, or certainly I look to, within the day. So what is my routine? My first routine, once I'm up and about, is to get up and start to do my journal entries. These are the starts where I started ages ago writing something about a loved one every single day, and then it grew into more of a journal, and I have a process within that. I try and wake up, and the first thing that I do every single morning, if I can, is to smile. It just puts my head on right, and it's a really incredible simple thing, but you feel better straight away for it. I have a cup of hot water and lemon. I then sit down and write my journal, which is a thought of the morning, whatever that might be. Maybe it might be just to reiterate the fact that you need to smile. My thought about my wife and my son, and I always try and send my love to somebody, whoever that might be, and it may be someone that I haven't spoken to for years and years. But there's always an incredible connection when you start to do this, that you'll actually find that that connection comes back to you, and people start to get either back in touch, or there'll be a coincidence where you thought about someone in the morning and they'll say, oh, I thought about you this morning. And you think, yeah, that's just a little bit too uncanny to be coincidence. I then write down my one thing. What's the one thing that's going to make this day easier? More, I keep forgetting the actual phrase, but what's the one thing that's actually going to make everything so much easier if I do it today? And then I go into yesterday's reflection. I look at my affirmation and learning, and then have a cup of tea and a morning chat with Deb. And then the whole effort of the presentation is really chasing sunrises. This is what I do to rely on the calmness and to put me in the right frame of mind to start each day. So I'm just see that Simon has come back into the presentation, and I'm hoping that I've more or less filled my 30 minutes. I've got one more slide, Simon. So my thoughts on routine are: choose something that makes you get out of bed with purpose in the morning. Make sure the first thing you do is put on a smile. Be grateful for everything that you need to be grateful for, and try and make your routine a habit. My routine replaces my habitual thoughts and apologies and worries. My routine fixes my head for the day. It doesn't solve anything for me, but it does put me in the right frame of mind. It does enable me to have that connection. So my purpose and my motivation is this. This is going to be me on a beach in 50 years' time on my 100th birthday, still going to be doing this and practicing yoga. I don't want it to come too quickly, but I do want to be there when it comes. And then I found this throughout the presentation of habits versus routine from Gandhi. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions, and your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. My last shameless plug is a calendar that I've been working on with some colleagues, Sue Pardy, Steve Carruthers from MK Snap, raising some money for YMCA Milton Keynes on some of the sunrises that have been experienced in and around the Milton Keynes area predominantly, but some slightly further afield, from my Instagram post, Running Without Beer. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to me over the last 30 minutes. I really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about Thrive, then please reach out to them. The next webinar is on the 29th of November 2022 and is entitled Neurodiversity for Managers, and will be hosted by one of Thrive's neurodiversity trainers, Mo Burry. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Simon.
Thank you, Matthew. And I don't know about anyone else, but when you were going through those routines at the end there, a lot of goosebumps on my arms. It was a lovely sentiment. It's always great to hear people's personal stories. And I did give you a little bit of extra time because I thought actually everyone's staying on, which was brilliant. And it was just such an amazing subject and such a personal journey. If you can stop sharing your screen, if that's okay, Matthew, just so everyone can see your beautiful face. Getting a lot of fantastic comments in there. If you'd like to read them before you disappear. Thank you everybody who has joined and who has stayed a little bit extra. Obviously Matthew is here for the next 5 minutes. If anyone does want to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. But if you do need to get on with your life and your day job, then we totally appreciate the time you've already spent with us. But if you have got a question for Matthew at all, please do pop that into the chat right now. The other thing to note as well is that although it was a shameless plug, it was actually one that I encouraged because I think that calendar is fantastic. It's only £9, and almost way over half of it is going to the YMCA in Milton Keynes, which is an amazing charity. So what I do ask Matthew, even more of a shameless plug, if you've got a link that you can drop into the chat where people can buy it, that'd be brilliant. But otherwise, we'll put that into the show notes as well.
Thank you, Simon.
No problem. I don't think we've got any questions coming through. Just an amazing appreciation for what you've done today, Matthew. So I think we'll finish up the webinar there if that's okay with you. But if you did want to just drop the link into the chat if you've got it. Otherwise, we'll
just trying to find it.
I was trying to filibust. I was trying to sort of lengthen it out as to.
Here we go. I've got it. I've got it.
Tracy said she would definitely. We're working on it, Tracy. Don't worry, we'll get there. We'll get there. There we go. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think you've just shared it to me and the panelists. So there it is for everybody. So yeah, feel free to buy a calendar or many. Buy many for your friends and family as well.
Thank you.
Matthew, thank you so much, my friend, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.